Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Strange Saturday Super Show, my favorite time here at the Script Heroes podcast. Today, we're talking about In Hell We Fight. Exactly, and I got the trade right here, which has
we have our
recently come
various types of In Hell We Fight. In Hell We Fight is
Yeah.
a special book for me and Jay. We were doing it for our book club before we even started the pod, and I think we were both pretty bummed that we didn't have an opportunity to talk about it, to share it with all of you.
Absolutely. But it is a little bit of an odd series, an amazingly odd series, but an odd series. And so I think we thought this would be the perfect opportunity to talk about it. But not to bury the lead, in I think about 10 minutes' time, we will be joined by John Layman, the
Yes.
writer and letter of the series himself, to answer all of our questions about the book. So ridiculously excited for that.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to start with, since it is a Strange Saturday Super Show, we're going to start with a little discussion about the book. So yeah, let me start with a brief little blurb and then summary of what happened, and then we'll get into it. Life in hell ain't easy. Demons try to torture you for all eternity. Monsters want to eat you. There's a stunning lack of reliable indoor plumbing, and it's almost impossible to get ice cream. At least until today, when 3 condemned teens and their annoying tag-along demon, Frenemy, embark on a daring scheme to hijack a demon lord's delivery truck. What happens next will take them on an epic journey across the underworld, an eternal excursion of nonstop excitement, danger, and adventure. And what they find in that ice cream delivery truck is spoilers coming throughout our discussion. You can jump to the interview where there might be some spoilers.
I would say there's probably spoilers in the interview too.
Yeah. Read the book and come back if you don't want spoilers. But they find an angel named Angel in the back of this truck that's been abducted by a demon who turns out to be the main character Midori's demon father, because she was raised by the Yakuza that were run by a demon. It's a strange book, but it's awesome, I promise you. But yeah, our main trio, we have Midori, who was part of the Yakuza and was killed by her demon father. We have Xander, who hates frogs and was killed by a frog devil and can barf up objects magically. And we have Ernie, who's killed by an axe to the head that was enchanted, so now there's always an axe in his head. Even when they remove an axe, another axe appears.
Which frankly is handy.
It's very
always
handy.
Have a weapon on hand.
Yeah. Balfi's this little demon that really wants to be their friend, who's the son of like the biggest demon in all of hell, like the main devil demon. And then Angel is an angel who was abducted from heaven to try to start a war. Basically, to briefly summarize the events of the book, they go on this kind of quest to bring Angel back to heaven so that they can get into heaven too. They meet a little demonic puppet that tries to murder them, but they barter with him to, exchange feathers for a map that will lead them to this oracle. They get kind of cut off by Midori's father at some point, have kind of a confrontation with him, and Balfi intimidates him by claiming that his father wants his help, and so the demon leaves them alone to go, fanboy over Balfi's father. And that's essentially a very short summary of the first volume. There's a lot of cool stuff in there that I didn't get to touch on, but I don't want to spend this whole time just going through the events of the book. But it's really a lot of fun. Katie,
it really
why don't you
is.
talk about what you like about the book?
Yeah, I mean,
or fill in any gaps that you want.
I have to give a huge shout out to our soon-to-be guest, John Layman, who did write the book, but also did the lettering for the book. And this book does such fun things with the lettering. I'm so excited to ask him about.
Also, just let me quickly insert, because I forgot to do it after the little blurb. The artist and colorist on the book is Jacques.
Yes, not to be confused with like Batman Jock, J-O-K Jock.
Yes. So just to give the full amazing creative team credit.
Yes.
And May, I believe, helps with the colors, co-colors it with Jacques from what I can tell within the credits of the book. So yes, there's the team. But anyway, continue.
The lettering is fantastic. There are so many little creative things going on because Jacques has such a distinct style. It's very like Mignola-esque with bold lines and shapes and like very well done flat colors, and the lettering fits so seamlessly into that, and will often incorporate the art of Jacques. Like instead of saying, I found a telescope, in a tiny little bubble, there'll just be an image of that telescope.
There's a little lightning storm one.
Yes, yeah, it's so much fun, and it really adds to the atmosphere of the book. Because this is truly just a good time of a book. It's meant to be a lighthearted and ridiculous romp of friendship and loyalty, and it's such a good time.
Yeah, but that's not to say that there's not well-built story, good characterization, character dynamics. Like, it is a well-made fun time. Like, there is so much love of, I think, comics in this, of, these kinds of stories, of these adventure, ensemble cast stories, and it's, top to bottom, it's so much fun. I don't know if I could bring myself to say a negative thing about this book if I had to try to find one. It is so ridiculously good. And like you said, it has a special place in our hearts. We absolutely love this series. Would so love to read more of this series, hopefully to come. But yeah, such a good time. I don't know what else is like the.
I mean,
the
I would actually love to, when we're still in the nitty gritty of talking about the book itself instead of the stories behind the book. Yeah. I also want to just give huge props to the character development we see throughout the book.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially for our main character, Midori. She hates demons as someone who was killed by a demon and is in hell being tortured by demons for all eternity. And you get to see such fun development of her relationship with Balfi, the demon who has essentially hitched a ride with them. Because it's a really great development where you could probably take text that she says to him in issue 5 and put it in an earlier issue, but it feels so much different in issue 5. The way that
if you want that, it's literally like the last interaction. There's her calling him a little idiot for taking too long picking their berries in their final interaction, which is so awesome.
It's so awesome because it shows a consistency in character while it feels like a developed relationship, like she doesn't.
Absolutely.
She's not nicer to him, but that their relationship has changed and grown, and that he is like a little part of their family now. And I think that that's a really like well done, subtle relationship.
It happens with Angel too, I think, with her, but she's not really nice to any. She's not even nice to her starting friends at the beginning, but there's the difference in the way she's not nice to them versus the way she's not nice to Angel and Balfi in the first issue, and then in the end, the way that she's not nice to all of them is kind of the same. In that, like, loving, she won't ever admit that she needs or wants or, cares about anybody, but you can feel it and it's palpable and it's just so good. The characters in this book are so good. They're so decisively different from each other. Like, it's a 5-character cast of your main characters, which is fairly big, but in terms of a especially for an indie book, I think that's a fairly big cast to introduce all of these characters across 5 issues, and I think it's done so well. You can never pick up like a dialogue from one of them and throw it on somebody else and have it make sense. They all speak differently and they all have different feelings and importances to the plot, which is so great.
It really is. And speaking on the characters as well, they're such well-written, like, teens and kids, because I think that they're all somewhere in the range of, like, 13 to 15 or something, and then Balfi might be a little younger.
Midori's a bit old. I think Midori's 16 or 17, something like that.
Still, like, not adult teen. And they all really do feel like that vibe. Like, they have all the, like, right emotional beats for teenage characters, and that's just always a very nice thing to see. We've talked about this before when writing younger characters. You can often fall into a very annoying pitfall, and I think Balfi is a prime example of being able to have a character who really does feel like, I don't know, he feels like the kind of like 10-year-old who wants to hang out with the teenagers and is like just annoying enough that he's still very likable, but you can understand his role as, like, the annoying tag-along.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's going to bring us to the end of our discussion. So let's get Mr. Layman in here so that we can talk about the book.
Let's do it. All right, here we are with John Layman, iconic comic creator. He has worked on Batman Eternal, Gambit, Xena Warrior Princess, Eleanor and the Egret, and of course, our topic of conversation today, In Hell We Fight. Thank you so much for coming on, John.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's awesome.
We typically like to kick off our interviews with kind of the same question for everyone, as aspiring creators ourselves, and a lot of our listeners are as well. We'd love to know how you got your start in comics.
Oh, good Lord. Interesting story. So I'm old. I'm pre-internet old. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be in comics and didn't know how to do it. So I was an English major. And I went to Long Beach State. I went to Chico State. And I had a girlfriend who was from San Diego. And I was living in San Francisco, watching like a roadie's house, like a tech guy, and his tour came back, and he's like, "Okay, you got to leave. You're done feeding my cat and watering my plants." And I was seeing this girl, and she's like, "Hey, things are heating up. You want to come live with me, or you want to see if it can work out together?" And I'm like, "Oh, you live in San Diego? That's where that Comic-Con is, right?" So I moved to San Diego. We didn't work out, but Comic-Con's there. I got a job as like a Jimmy Olsen, like a news assistant for San Diego Union Tribune. And I started writing what I called the Geek Beat. Like when Spawn had a TV series, I'd write an article about it. When when Judge Dredd had a Stallone movie, I'd write about it. And when San Diego Comic-Con came around, I'd write about it. Because Jim Lee's studio was in La Jolla, San Diego.
Right.
So they were always looking for the local angle. And so after about 3 years, they kind of knew that I knew my stuff, and they hired me as an assistant editor. And then I was a full editor, and then suddenly DC bought us, and I was a DC editor. And after about 5 years and 200 books, I decided to go freelance and, just take the plunge because I wanted to be a writer. And, you start at the bottom and work your way up and then go back to the bottom.
No, that's awesome. So transitioning into our topic of conversation for this episode, how did you kind of come to land on the idea for In Hell We Fight? You mentioned in your letter in issue 1 that you were looking to write something kind of fun and uplifting. I don't think most people would jump to hell for that, so I'm very interested in how you got there.
After COVID was a really dark time for me. I mean, I think it was for everybody, but I was working on this book I really liked for Skybound, and they killed it with no notice right before pandemic lockdown. My mom died. My wife lost her job. Like, just shittiness. And can I cuss?
Yeah, you can curse as much as you want.
And I just wanted to, that's as close as I can get to like a family. You're like it was light, and arguably maybe it was too light. I didn't want to kill my characters. I didn't want to hurt them, but I also wanted to go to kind of a subversive place. And that's where the book came out of. I had met Jock in at like Uruguay Con, my first and only South American con. And he showed me his stuff, and it was really great. But I had just finished Chew, and I was real tired and didn't want to work on anything. And he just hit me at the right time. Like he's like, "Hey, you want to see my new stuff? You liked it, 2 or 3 years ago." And I'm like, "Sure." And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe I shouldn't let this guy go." And I had this idea, and we took it to Eric Stevenson, and he approved it like that, which was really nice. On the flip side, I tend to like to plan my books out more. Like Chew and Outer Darkness, I had planned for like 5 years. And this was a book that I hadn't planned. It was like, well, you know what? I got a book. I'm just going to make it up as I go. And it was a little outside my comfort space. I usually don't rewrite myself because I have planned so much. I know what I'm doing. And this book, I was making up as I go. And there was a lot of self-doubt. I had and maybe it was just coming out of COVID and lockdown, and I hadn't done anything for a while. But it was a tough book.
Well, let me say, in my opinion, it doesn't come across like you didn't have it planned out. It seems like it's got a very decisive direction and style, and we just spent 10 minutes talking about how much we both love the series so much, and yeah.
Well, Jock was fantastic. Super hard worker, really enthusiastic. He was willing to really kind of roll with the punches and just kind of. I mean, he was a great partner. I'd love to work with him again.
Well, he has an awesome style. We were picking up in How We Fight as it came out and discussing it, and the aesthetic we kept coming back to is that it feels so like Mignola-esque with the bold colors, the bold line work.
He also, he's from South America, and he spends a lot of time with Eduardo Riso, so it's got a little, the 100 Bullets. But yeah, there's some Mignola, and it's kind of I'd say 75% Riso, 25% Mignola, or close.
Yeah.
I feel like it especially comes across in the like anthology stories that you did in the Image anthologies. Like those feel so.
That was fun, and I feel like I don't write for a trade, but I feel like the trade works better because you get the whole story and then you get those anthology stories, and it really sort of like shows you what the tone's supposed to be.
Just picked up the trade, reread it as the volume, and it felt like it works so insanely well as a volume. But I think you had said in the letter at the end of issue 5 that you plan this to be a 15-issue series, right?
Yeah, and I don't have the financials on the trade yet. Like, I'm paying for this out of my own pocket, and the market's really tough right now. So we're kind of waiting for it to pay itself off a little more before we go, before we go any further.
You hear that, everybody? Buy the trade if you want more. It's your fault if we don't get more in Hell We Fight.
But yeah. Chew was 60 issues. Got real lucky. I don't think there's going to be too many more 60 issues books, that aren't written by Brian K. Vaughan. And then Outer Darkness, I thought, okay, the market's changed. I'm going to go 30 issues. Couldn't get there. Skybound books weren't really selling, and it didn't do well, and they killed it right before the pandemic. And then I thought, okay, I thought 30 was the new 60. I think 15 is the new 30, and we couldn't even get there yet. We gotta wait for it to, pay through, and then do more. Fortunately, Jock's fast. He's talented. He's willing to do more when the time comes. In fact, he pings me every few weeks. How are we doing?
Love that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we love so much about this book is that you hit that kind of bright and uplifting spot so well, and the humor is so well done in this book.
Thank
can
you.
You talk a bit about balancing humor with, because all humor is not going to be particularly funny. All dour is not going to be particularly great.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
a lot of it is just in the characters, like, some of them have like really good, the kid with the axe in his head, like you play it straight. You don't make it a punchline, and you let it be funny in the world without making the character be a punchline. And like Balfi, the little demon kid, we just decided to write him like completely innocent, kind of annoying. The humor's in the personality. You get the personality right, and the humor kind of writes itself. Like, it's not like I'm going for jokes. It's
right.
I think that's why it lands so well.
Yeah, I'm trying to do
when you're doing just jokes and quips, like I always feel like 1 in 10 hit, and then the other 9 feel unnecessary. But when you do the more like situational within the story humor that you do so well in Hell We Fight, it just all lands, and it feels very fun and enjoyable.
This cat is ridiculous. Thank you.
Here. It's your Balfi.
Yeah. He missed me. I've been gone for 8 days, so he's being especially friendly.
So we talked a little bit earlier. We mentioned that you did the couple anthology stories in Image. So my question is, how do you balance doing anthology stories while you're doing like something that's meant to be a 5 or 15 issue story?
I think I like the anthologies better than the trade. I mean, it was real fun to do just kind of these light slice of lives, and like the first story, like is kind of a crossover with The Silver Coin, which
I love that story.
is
So
an
good.
anthology book that I liked, and I read it, and it's like, I want to write a Silver Coin story. But, basically in the anthology, anyone who finds the silver coin, something bad happens. But I thought in hell, it would be the reverse. You find it, it becomes your lucky coin. And I just talked to Michael Walsh, and I'm like, hey, man, I like your book. Can I do this? I'll give you rights to reprint the story wherever, I'll give you special thanks. And, that's what's great and kind of punk rock about comics, especially comics you own. You can just say, fuck it. And, if someone wants to do a crossover, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. We recently had an interview with Dan Price, who did, Bigfoot Knows Karate, The Latex Avenger. And he did the same thing. It's when you own your stuff, you can cross over with whoever you want. You can keep bringing it back. And it's just a really cool thing.
In Chew, we did a crossover with Revival, and it's just because I'm buddies with Tim Seeley and Mike Norton, and I'm like, hey, man, I like your book. Here's my story idea. And, it was like a handshake agreement between friends. We're not out to kind of screw each other over rights. We're not, it's not really about the money. I mean, it's nice when you make money, but it was really just like having fun with somebody else's toys.
Yeah, I don't think most people, especially these days, get into comics for the money. Gotta get into it for the love of the medium.
That is for sure.
Yeah, so you're actually the first letterer that we've interviewed. Yeah. You do so much fun stuff in Hell We Fight with your lettering. There are the images in the speech bubbles, the little like emojis. There's a scene where Balfi is rambling at Angel, and he's rambling so much that his speech bubble, it just cuts off the bottom of the panel.
Well,
what? Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask your question before I interrupt you.
I mean, that was basically it. What is the process of lettering, and specifically lettering your own work?
So the writer is very different from the letterer. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, wow, you can edit, you can rewrite your stuff. And it's like, I don't do that. The writer turns his stuff in, and the letterer tries to make it work. That being said, I can't draw, and I wish I could, but like, lettering is as close to, for a writer, to controlling the page as you can get if you can't draw. Like, I can really kind of guide where the eye goes, and show you where it wants to be playful. And the other thing is, lettering takes a different side of the brain for me. Like, I have to be in the zone to write, but lettering I can do while I'm watching TV. And if you're a professional letterer, you're doing it for 10 or 15, maybe $20 a page, not usually these days. So you're working as fast as possible so you can pay the rent. If it's your own book and I'm sitting in front of the TV, I will noodle a sound effect for half an hour. And no letterer who's working for a page rate can do that, or they'd go broke. But my own book, I can take all the time I want and really get playful, which is why I like to letter my own stuff when I can.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly shows you have so much control over the pace of conversation as well, kind of where those punchier lines are able to hit. With the little emojis, those seem to be Jock's art.
Oh yeah, those were all Jock, and that was just kind of his style. Like Rob Guillory on Chew liked to put these little inside jokes, and what I've learned is let artists do their own thing. If you give them freedom to be themselves, you're going to get their best work. So I learned early on, dummy, that he likes to do these like weird little emojis, and it just adds to the book. So let him. The only problem was sometimes I had to like cover them with actual dialogue. I'm like, sorry, Jock, but there's no room.
No, it's such a cool choice. And so they weren't part of the original script at all.
No. I didn't know they were coming, and once they were there, I'm just like, hey, this is just a bonus. He's English isn't his first language, so he's almost speaking in like a universal, because it doesn't matter if you speak Spanish, Portuguese, English, you can understand that. So, why not roll with it?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it also works so well for these kind of younger teenage characters in that kind of language of texting, essentially. Like the dialogue is written as dialogue, but having those little image pops up really fits that vibe.
It's almost like is it called a rebus when there's like a screw and a ball and it means screwball, like it told a story, it conveyed emotion, which you always want to do in books.
And speaking of those younger characters that Katie was talking about, do you have a certain approach to writing teenagers or writing these younger characters?
No, I wrote them just like adults. They don't do baby talk. They're not they're not infantis. I don't treat them like they're children, because children are fully formed people. And I think that's kind of the key. Like the people who write, like, there's a couple writers who I won't name who write kids like they're freaking babies and they're annoying. So, I just wrote them like people.
It's funny. We had a conversation about writing younger characters on the podcast, man, a few months back, and we were talking a lot about how it can feel really weird when like teenagers are written like 5-year-olds or like 8-year-olds, and it comes
some people like just
false.
decide, hey, I'm going to write this person. They're not an adult, so I'm going to write them like a child. Doesn't matter if they're 5 or 12; they have the same voice. And I would rather do the opposite. I would rather, write them as an adult, but they're, it came. I think it came across kind of in their worldview. They were more innocent. Even, even Midori, who's like, this assassin. At the end of the day, they're kids. So they're. I'm not saying their stakes were lower, but I guess their motivations weren't. They're not worried about paying rent and
their motivation was ice cream.
Which was also fun. Ice cream in hell. Like, it's very sort of innocent setup.
Mm-hmm. That actually leads me into something I wanted to ask you about, is like building out this hell. It's not a very traditional hell. It's a very unique, I think, world that you built in this hell of like, okay, you can maybe sometimes get ice cream, but it's flavored, really weirdly, and like when they die, they go to the worst hell.
Yeah.
But they like have autonomy. They're not like being tortured.
Yeah, it was fun because they got to go to the big city one time and meet that
Woody and his shopkeep.
The dummy character Woody was actually going to be. He was going to show up in every arc in a different situation, and he's kind of like the gruff guy who's kind of pissed at the kids, but he always helps them out. And one of my problems for this book is I tend to think really large. Like I like to world build, and I almost feel like there was almost too big a world for 5 issues, which is why I want to do more. And but that's just the way I create. Like Chew was great because I got 60 issues, 70 counting the spinoff. But I only had 5 issues, and it's like, I gotta let it pay through so we can do more. But yeah, I couldn't help but growing the world, and I hope when you read it, you kind of feel how big the world is, even beyond the story.
Absolutely, the world feels huge, which is why I think we're both so excited for hopefully there to be more of this, because it feels like there's so much more you could do.
Yeah, and there was some stuff I didn't like. I think in the last short story, I kind of got to the I didn't have time for it, but basically the house is a pet and it kind of follows them around. And I alluded to that, but I couldn't get it in the story. And the story is basically, it's a journey, through hell. And every issue, the house kind of shows up. So they've got a base and now they've got a vehicle, it's Scooby-Doo, they're a group and they've got their things.
Yeah, they are definitely very Scooby Gang-esque.
Yes.
But you obviously get to build that world here. You get to build a world with Chew. You've also worked on, DC and Marvel projects where that world is already built. What changes about your approach when you're picking up a character who's already built, already established, versus coming up with your own world?
Well, you can't play God. You got to be true to the character. And like I'm a person who kind of fakes it. Like, okay, you're writing Gambit. Did you go and read every single Gambit issues? No, I read enough to fake it. And you don't really need to. I'm not a big continuity guy, so I would rather you not feel like you have to read 70 gambits to understand it. I want you to come in and understand it with as little knowledge as possible. That being said, Batman's not going to kill a busload of nuns. You gotta color within the lines. When I want to play God, I've got my own books to do that. When I want to play with a toy that's not mine, you got to be respectful of it. You can't bust the toy. That's not your job.
No, that makes a ton of sense.
But it's fun. Like, who doesn't want to write Batman? Who doesn't want to write Spider-Man?
You just
absolutely.
You just go in recognizing there's 80 years of sort of legacy. There's these fans, and respect the fans and respect the character.
Speaking of that, is there any character that you don't own that you've really wanted to write that you haven't gotten a chance to yet? Obviously, you've written a ton of them at this point, but is somebody still there?
I have an ongoing bucket list. And the cool thing is I've done enough, and my bucket list is I just have to write the character. I just have to put words in their mouth for, a panel or two. I don't have to do 100 issues of the Flash or whatever. And I've knocked, I think, all my between Gambit, House of M, and Marvel Zombies versus Army of Darkness, I've touched every Marvel character I want to. I got Howard the Duck. I've got, I've got,
Amazing.
the Blob, all this, all the characters I want. And then DC, it was a little tougher because, I wanted to, basically in the last 2 years, I've notched off a bunch of my bucket list with just specials. I had Harley Quinn on there. I had Swamp Thing. I had John Constantine. I had Deadman. Harley was a big one. And, and I have written, sorry, somebody's messaging me. I have written all those characters. I think I still, if I look, Plastic Man. Plastic Man was a huge one, top of my bucket list for decades. I finally got to write a Plastic Man story. I think Firestorm and maybe Etrigan are probably the last.
I love Etrigan. I would love to see you do an Etrigan story. That would be incredible.
And I also have beyond superheroes, Godzilla was high on my list. Mars Attacks, I've gotten to write that. Aliens, Predator, Army of Darkness. I've written some great licensed stuff, even though superheroes are technically licensed. The biggest thing on my to-do list is They Live. If I could write a They Live comic book, all my dreams would come true.
Well, that is so awesome. It's so rad to see how many you've been able to check off the list.
We're talking, I went freelance in 2001, 2002. So, we're talking 20 plus years, but, I look at my bookshelf and, teenage me who didn't have the internet, who wanted to be in comics. I mean, it's a pretty amazing, career, even though, I'm not Scott Snyder or Tom Taylor or these guys who have these giant runs. On the other hand, I like superheroes. I don't love it's not my goal to write, 4 ongoings at the same time. I'm just happy to touch characters. And, I'm as proud of my Godzilla run or my, Mars Attacks run as I am, Batman. Mars Attacks, I was a huge Mars Attacks before the movie was a trading card set in the 1960s. And I was actually a collector of that. And so when IDW got that, I call up Chris Ryall, and I think maybe he knew. He was editor-in-chief. I'm like, Chris, I have to do this book for you guys. And, he sort of knew. And, I got to.
Yeah, so obviously you have a lot of influences in the world of comics and beyond. Do you think you pulled from anywhere specific for In Hell We Fight? Do you see any kind of echoes of any other things that you love in this book?
It was my attempt to do a Stranger Things or a Goonies or, basically, even Little Rascals. Not that I think I watched Little Rascals, but, kind of the kid gang getting into trouble. That's the vibe I wanted. So I think I was pulling from all those kind of things. Stand By Me, basically any of that kid group getting into trouble, sticking together kind of genre.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the ones that I felt as a fan of the kind of like kids on bikes style of story.
Yeah, exactly. Paper Girls.
Yeah, it's so fun and very well executed as one of those stories.
Thank you.
Definitely. Let me get way too specific with this next question about something particular in Hell We Fight that me and Katie have talked probably more about than anybody should when reading a comic book. But we loved. You have it's either in like issue 2 or 3. You talk about the concept of every time they die, they go to like a worse hell.
Yeah.
So we're having a conversation of like, how does that work? Because they're in like this shared world. Like, do they just die and they appear in the same like world, but their life is just worse, or is it like a physically different hell?
Well, I thought when they die, like, because the only thing that makes hell tolerable is their friendship. To die, they would lose their friends. That would be the worst. And we didn't get to that this arc. Next arc would have gone a little darker. I just kind of alluded to it, but yeah, I figure when you're in hell and the one thing you've got is your friends, losing them would be the worst. The worst thing imaginable, and it's hell. They're going to throw the worst things imaginable at you.
Absolutely,
we saw put. Xander being tortured by the frog demon over and over and over again.
What happened is he died 100 times, and I think he even said like as soon as he met Midori and joined up with his gang, he hasn't died since. So the illusion was he just kept dying until he met up with these people, and now they're trying not to die.
Which is such a fun angle for you're already in hell, but there are those stakes of you're dead, but you can die again.
Yeah. You got to have some kind of stakes,
Exactly. Yeah. And what is higher stakes than going to worse hell?
Yes.
Well, are there any nuggets you can give us of what we might see come if more Hell We Fight starts rolling out?
Yeah, well, so the next one's going to be very kind of Ernie-centric. And on that last page, when it shows them fighting the Frog Devil, like, it's almost like a future jump. Like, if you look at Ernie, he's all white, and, like, they're wearing different costumes. Like, the thing I was trying to do was show you how, not quite how it's going to end, but definitely a flash forward, and these were hints of what was going to come. But yeah, they would just keep going through hell. There was there was going to be sort of a hell of war where they're going through these battlefields and they get tied up with these crazy generals that all they're doing is fighting and dying in battle, and and Ernie was going to get sucked into that. But that was it's the next arc would be The Empire Strikes Back. There's Star Wars, introduce everyone. Empire Strikes Back is where things get dark. Return of the Jedi is where things get resolved. Like, next arc would be the really dark one.
You're just making me want it more and more.
It's fun because I haven't done any cons since the book came out, so I haven't got fan feedback, so this is really nice. I just went to Comic-Con India, and of course they had no idea what In Hell We Fight was. And it's tough because India, like, they know me as they advertise me as like a Marvel or DC guy, but they don't really they're like, did you invent Batman? I'm like, no, Batman's been around since 1929. I'm old, but I'm not that old. And you can't really explain, there's a language difference, and there's people with families, and they were having me sign Dark Knight. They were having me sign like Batman Year One, and there's a point where you try to explain it, and then you're just like, fuck it, just sign it and make them happy. You are technically a Batman writer, a Spider-Man writer. Yeah. Maybe you didn't work on that book. This is as close as they'll ever get to meeting a Batman writer. So just sign it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what my point was. Oh, my point
you mentioned doing international.
I haven't had a lot of fan feedback on In Hell We Fight. Nobody writes letters anymore. And then Twitter's kind of dying.
Maybe we should start writing letters.
Since Elon Musk went crazy, you don't have comics. Twitter is not as robust as it used to be.
No, it's certainly different now.
Yeah. No, for
Is
sure.
a letters
we
section something you would consider putting in future volumes? I mean, we've seen it pop up again with like petrol-headed Image, obviously Skybound with their new Energon stuff. They're doing letters columns.
Well, Chew had it, and it was really cool because in Chew we because I don't really like doing letters pages. It's like it was always the last thing I did because I had to like design it and lay it up and worst of all proofread it. Like the typos always got in the letters page. So in Chew I had people just send cat pictures, and so it was easy to just like, hey, here's Bob Jones in Kentucky, and here's a picture of Fluffy. And what was funny was like years later I'd be at a con, Bob Jones would show up and he's like, hey man, you printed Fluffy in issue 43. My parents don't care about your book. My friends don't. I bought 15 copies for everybody. They don't care about your book, but they wanted to see Fluffy. And so like it's a real touchstone. It made really easy letter columns, and people are always like, yeah, I got my, Spot is dead now, but you immortalized him in, this or that issue. So it became a really, I would get 20, 30 cat pictures. It's easier to send that than write a letter.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a cool, fun, like, and like you mentioned with people who had passed away and everything, like it's kind of a heartwarming thing. Yeah, very cool way to do it.
But the thing, like, that was more than 6 years ago at this point. I mean, Chew started in 2009, and the comics scene is completely different. I mean, Twitter changed things, and just letters columns, and even text things. I wrote like a little intro in the first issue and the last issue. Mm-hmm. That's your chance to talk to the audience, and a lot of books you don't get that at all.
No, it was really nice to have that, especially the one at the end of issue 5, just like letting people know what's going on with the series. There's so many, especially like you mentioned, the landscape has changed. There's a lot less long-running, ongoing series. At the very least, there's usually gaps now in ongoing series. Yeah. So many where like 5 or 6 or whatever the first volume is ends, and you're just like, okay, well, they haven't solicited anything else, but it didn't really feel like an end. Like, is there more? Is there not more? So you like letting everybody know.
Journalism has changed too. I mean, there used to be CBR and Bleeding Cool, and they still exist, but they're kind of listicles now. And between no letters and no real comics journalism, it's hard to get news. It's hard to hey, where's that issue 6? At least I let you know, hey, we're going to try to come back when we can. Don't go to the store in 30 days. There's not going to be an issue in 30 days.
Yeah, no, genuinely, it's so nice to actually have a book that tells you exactly what's going on, so I also think it was great because you said, like, you want more, buy the trade. It's a nice little call to action to let people know that this is, what they need to do.
I said, I haven't got numbers. I have no idea how the trade's doing. I haven't been doing U.S. shows, so, I'm kind of in a vacuum.
I got the last one at my Barnes & Noble, so it did well, at least at my Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble? That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you want it to be in comic book stores, but if it's selling in Barnes & Noble and Amazon, that's even better.
Yeah, like I've got my actual issues from my comic book store, but at least the comic book stores by me don't really, especially with indie books, don't really get trades. So when it comes to the trade, it's Barnes & Noble. When it comes to the issues, it's the comic book store.
And I design those too, and lettering and designing books are one of my favorite things. Like once I get the package in my hand, it's like, wow, this turned out really nice.
Oh, that is so cool how much of the process you have your hand in with your own
Katie,
books.
The other part of it is I'm cheap, and the more I do myself, the less I have to pay somebody else. So Chew was the same way as In Hell We Fight. It was a 2-person band, and it makes the money split easier. If you're paying a colorist, a letterer, a designer, an editor, that's just money going out. If it's 2 of you, chop it in half.
There you go. There's some good wisdom.
Yeah, but it's because I'm cheap.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good
and
thing
talented.
To be. I'll take it. Thank you.
I was gonna say, is there anything else you wanted to, let people know you have stuff coming out you want to advertise or anything?
So, I've right now I've got that Suicide Squad kills Justice
yes,
League.
We reviewed the first issue on the podcast that you did.
I'm writing that, and the funny thing was, when I say I'm writing it, I wrote it like 2 years ago, but the game kept being delayed.
Right.
So it's funny now, like, I'm doing press, and they're like, "Oh, how come this scene happened?" And I'm like, what scene? And then like, it's weird because I don't do ongoing DC, but DC kind of calls me for like funny weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got an ape rule fool special that's all like monkeys, and they call me, do you want to write good DC monkeys versus bad DC monkeys? And I'm like, oh yes. And
oh my god.
And it's got a scratch and sniff cover. Like,
yes,
I am I've had foil covers, I've had, I don't know, lenticular is not the right word, but it's really cool to have kind of, like they did a villains month where it wasn't quite lenticular, but it was some kind of weird thing. Like, I'm just a sucker for gimmick covers. I like to buy them, and there's nothing better than having that in your own book.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I'm doing is they called me to write like a funny Spawn book. Spawn Kills Every Spawn, which is, they got this really talented guy, Rob Sketchcraft Dunez, who's new to comics. Super talented, super like insanely detailed artwork. And we've been working on that. And McFarlane Studios is in Phoenix, just like I am. And so I would come to the office, got to know the guys, and they're like, "Hey man, do you want to write we're moving the deck chairs around. Do you want to write the Spawn team book?" And I'm
Switched, right?
Yeah, I'm like, seriously? Me? And like, I never even like imagined that I would be doing that, but I jumped at it, and one of my goals, I wrote 60 issues of Chew, 70 I mean, that's its own thing.
Yeah.
But I think my longest run was maybe Detective, and I want to beat that. Like, I want to do 25, 30 issues of Scorch. Like, I really want to do this for a long time and kind of put my mark on it.
Yeah.
And it's
kind of on brand with In Hell We Fight, right? Hell, creatures, stuff.
I'd love to have a crossover. But it's weird because, McFarlane has been around forever. He's a legend. He's got this giant toy studio. He doesn't need to do comics. And yet he comes in on press day and he's like, "Yeah, move this balloon this way, and to do this." And I come in on press day too to get the book out. And I'm sitting there with Todd McFarlane, and he's just noodling stuff, and I'm like, "Dude, don't you have better things to do than work on a John Layman comic? Shouldn't you be on a Learjet to the French Riviera or whatever?" But he, after all this time, he really cares about comics, and Spawn's his baby, the universe is his baby, and it's really like kind of inspiring to see this dude who doesn't need to be sitting there on a Monday afternoon with John Layman working on a freaking comic book. He's there in his office. It's and he's a legend. He's not shy about dispensing wisdom. So I'm sitting there and it's like, how many people would just cut off their arm for this opportunity?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to be a comic book fan and not be a Todd McFarlane fan.
Oh, yeah. At least, I mean, like, all these Image guys, they've been around forever. Like, even if you don't like Todd now, and I'm not saying why wouldn't you, but like, he's done something. All these people have made their mark. You're sitting with a legitimate, comics legend, and it's pretty fucking cool.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome, and I think that's a great note to kind of transition into the end of the interview. You were before we went into that, you were calling out a couple things that people can find you in. Was there anything else you wanted to go, or is that everything that people can expect?
No, I've got 2 cons for the year, and one's in South Africa and one's in New Zealand. So once again, I don't know when I'm going to see American fans. But yeah, I've got this DC stuff in the Scorched right now, and I'm waiting for In Hell We Fight to kind of pay out so we can do more. I mean, Jock is ready to go, and I've got the story. It's just it's just financing, which is tough. There's
absolutely,
every time you turn around, there's a new publisher. And I think being a retailer is the toughest job in comics, because every week you have to place bets, on what's going to sell, what are you going to get stuck with, and it's a great time to be a reader because there's so many choices. But it's, on the other hand, you said this before, books don't last. You like, when's the next time you're going to get a Preacher or a Y the Last Man or a Chew that lasts 60 issues? Marvel seems like they reset every 12 issues. And indie books are competing with 500 books a month. It's tough. It's a tough time.
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you so much again for coming on. We love In Hell We Fight. We love your work.
Thank you so much.
And this was such an awesome thing to get to do, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
I'm going back to bed. It's like 8:30 in Phoenix. So thanks for having me, guys.
We appreciate you bending the Tower timeline with you being in another time zone. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a good one.
Take care.